The world around us is full of wonders, some of which are modern and some of which are ancient. We can make dozens of videos about modern wonders, and perhaps we will one day. But in this video, we want to talk about ancient wonders. There are a great many that have never been adequately explained by historians or scientists, so let's take a look at them. We begin with a fact that's almost impossible to comprehend. 1,200 years ago, the Chimu civilization of Peru invented a basic form of telephone. It's not exactly a smartphone, but it's capable of enabling spoken communication across short distances. The Chimu Telephone was found in the ruins of Chan Chan in late 2020, and is the only artifact of its kind ever to be found in the country. You might have made something similar to it when you were a child. The telephone is made of a pair of cups connected by a 70-foot-long cotton twine string. We think the cord may have run between two neighboring houses, or perhaps from one end of a large communal building to the other. Archaeologists can't decide whether it was thought of as a sophisticated device for the use of the elite, or whether it was a simple child's toy. We might never find that out, because the Chimu had no written language, so they didn't leave behind any records for us to consult. It's not the most high-tech phone you'll ever see, but it would have worked perfectly well. There was a time when we thought we understood the so-called Nebra Sky disk. Experts were pretty sure that it was around 3,600 years old and depicted the sun, a crescent moon, and the stars that make up Pleiades. As of September 2020, all those theories are out of the window. Two experts from Goethe University in Frankfurt, Germany, have concluded that it's actually 1,000 years younger than has always been believed, and is therefore a relic of the Iron Age. Changing the age of the artifact means that the astronomical assumptions made about what it depicts must also now be considered obsolete. There are also new questions about where the artifact came from. It was discovered in 1999 in Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, but the copper used in its construction is from Austria, and the gold and bronze both come from Cornwall in England. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make it, using materials gathered from far and wide. But if we are wrong about its age by 1,000 years, then we have to accept that the stars on it are unlikely to represent the Pleiades. What might they represent instead? Unfortunately, we have no idea at the moment. Here in the 2020s, we still don't have a totally accurate method of predicting earthquakes. It's a problem that the human race has been wrestling with for thousands of years, as evidenced by the fact that the first known attempt to build an earthquake detector happened in China in the year 132. This is the seismograph designed by Zhang Heng, and it's incredibly sophisticated for a product of that era. Zhang's device works by placing it on the ground, where it's sensitive enough to detect tremors from long distances. When the tremors are detected, a pendulum within the seismograph swings. Should the swing become strong enough, it will dislodge a ball from the mouth of one of the ornate dragons on the side of the device, which then drops into the waiting mouth of one of the equally ornate frogs. This not only indicates the approach of the earthquake, but also gives the observer a rough idea of which direction the earthquake is happening in. We can't decide whether to be impressed that Zhang Heng was so far ahead of his time, or embarrassed that we haven't come up with a much better way of predicting earthquakes all these years later. The Swiss Army knife is every adventurer's friend. If you're heading out into the great outdoors for a little wild camping, you'd be foolish not to take one with you. Should we really credit the Swiss for the invention of the ubiquitous multi-tool, though? Possibly not. This Roman answer to the Swiss Army knife was found during archaeological excavations on the Mediterranean coast in 2019. It was made during the 3rd century, and came complete with a toothpick, a spatula, a fork, a spoon, and a knife. Based on that, it was probably used to prepare and then eat meals. The knife is silver, which suggests that the tool belonged to someone important. In fact, given that we've only ever found one such device, the person who owned it might also have been the person who invented it. We'll never know whether that was the case, But what we do know is that the Swiss Army knife wasn't invented until 1,500 years after this anonymous Roman inventor made their pocket meal kit. Why didn't the idea catch on at the time? We wish we knew. King Tutankhamun might not have been the most significant ruler of ancient Egypt, but he's one we know a lot about, thanks to the discovery of his unspoiled tomb by Howard Carter during the 1920s. We're still finding out new information about him now, including the fact that he might have spent his nights sleeping on the world's first fold-out camping bed. They're 10 a penny at places like IKEA nowadays, but it must have seemed like a technological marvel 3,300 years ago. There were 5 beds inside his tomb when it was opened, but this one wasn't like the others. It's smaller, sits lower to the ground, and is made of 3 separate moving pieces that could be folded away into a Z shape. Quite why the most important man in Egypt would have needed this basic convenience is unknown. He was only very young when he passed away, though, so perhaps he still enjoyed inviting his friends around for sleepovers. A few 2-fold beds have been found in Egyptian tombs before, but King Tut's 3-fold bed is the only one of its kind to be discovered so far. Although the religions of Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism differ from each other, they share some key beliefs. One of them is that the Vajra is the chosen weapon of the gods. You'll find mentions of Vajra going back as far as the Rig Veda, the first part of the 4 known Vedas. From an etymological point of view, there are 2 ways we can understand the word Vajra, both of which come from Sanskrit. The first is as lightning, and the second is as diamond. In both instances, it's thought the intention of the word is to represent the weapon as an irresistible force. According to mythology, Indra was told directly by Vishnu that a weapon made from the bones of the Hindu sage Dadichi would be capable of destroying the serpent demon known as Vritra. The weapon in question was created by the divine artisan Vashtar and proved to be successful. Indian traditions hold the Vajra as the most powerful weapon in the universe. That's a bold claim for a weapon that's basically a club with a ribbed head, but there's no shortage of people who believe in it. Why did the ancient inhabitants of Mesopotamia create so many clay balls? That's a mystery that scientists and historians have been attempting to get to the bottom of for decades. The question has been the subject of an ongoing study since 2013, but no conclusions have been drawn yet. Most of the balls are at least 5,500 years old, and the most tantalizing theory about their purpose is that they might be the world's oldest data storage system. The first set of ancient Mesopotamian clay balls was found in western Iran during the late 1960s. The smallest of them are roughly the same size as a golf ball, whereas the largest are more like basketballs. Just over 150 have been found to date. Their purpose remained a mystery until technology advanced to the point where we could peek inside the balls without breaking them open by using scanners and 3D modeling. We now know that each ball contains tokens made up of various geometric shapes. It's possible that these tokens represented encoded information, perhaps recording the value of a trade or the number of goods involved in an exchange. We'd only be able to prove this if we had a cipher to crack the code with, though, and no such cipher has ever been found. If you wanted to find your way around the Pacific Ocean from the coast of the Marshall Islands hundreds of years ago, you'd need a stick chart. These hard-to-comprehend complex charts were used by the Marshallese to work out not only where they were in relation to other islands, but how ocean swell patterns worked. The stick charts were usually made from the midribs of coconut fronds, with each shell tied to the framework representing an island. Larger islands are represented by the junction of 2 sticks, while threads represent wave crests and the directions they took. No stick chart looks like any other stick chart, so it's likely that each one was unique to the person who made it, and could only be understood by them. Nobody knows when the Marshallese started making stick charts because nobody bothered to document the tradition until the mid-19th century. but they remained in use until the end of the Second World War, when electronic navigation aids finally reached the Marshall Islands. They might look primitive, but they're thought to be the earliest known tools for mapping ocean swells. When you think of the kind of weapons that might be available to a modern army, rocket launchers are probably quite close to the top of your list. It might therefore surprise you to know that variations on the idea of rocket launchers have been around since the 16th century. They're a Korean invention, and the Koreans called them hwacha. The English translation of the word is close to fire chariot. The invention of the hwacha is a big part of the reason that Korea was able to repel the Japanese attempt to conquer the country in the Imjin War of the 1590s. There's some anecdotal evidence that fire chariots might have existed in Korea 100 years earlier than that, but it can't be proven. Each hwacha was basically a board full of holes on a two-wheeled cart. The holes would be lined up with the target, and arrows would be placed into them. Each arrow had a shaft full of gunpowder, which was used as a propellant. The earliest hwacha could launch 100 of these rockets at a time, but later models doubled that capacity and went even higher. They were dangerous to use because of the risk of explosion, but their deadliness made the risk worthwhile. If you can work out the true purpose of Volel paper machines, you'll outstrip the achievements of any living historian. What we know for certain is that these surprisingly complex machines can be used to calculate the date and the time. According to Ramon Lull of Mallorca, the man who invented the Volvel in the 13th century, they can also calculate and identify absolute truth. It would be easy to dismiss such a claim as the ramblings of a madman, but Lull was among the most respected scientists of his era. His invention is comparable to the astrolabe, with the important distinction that the Volvel is much smaller and made of paper rather than brass and steel. Lull believed that every religion in the world of his time ought to be assimilated into one, and he also believed that the Volvel would somehow help with that process. If anybody ever understood how that process would work, the information has been lost. We know that aligning the hole in the Volvel with the pole star and then centering the crossed circles around it would give you the date and the approximate time, and maybe your approximate location too. But how it could determine the truth is a mystery. Still, that didn't prevent them from being banned for fear that they could be used in witchcraft or sorcery. Ooh. Why did the Vikings seem to make such an easy job of conquering other European countries and races? Were they really that good on the battlefield, or did they just have the best swords? It might have been a bit of both, but their swords helped. They were of such outstanding quality that they effectively became the world's first branded product. You knew you were buying a genuine Ulfbert sword 1,000 years ago because the maker's name was stamped on the blade. Historians believe that Ulfbert swords were the first in the world to be made by casting, with melted iron and carbon poured into a mold and left to cool, thus doing away with the impurities that often weakened the ancient swords of other races. This method of sword manufacture wasn't mastered by any other European race for 200 years after the Vikings came up with it in the 11th century, which begs the question of where they got the idea from. Some experts suggest they acquired the secret from a small Asian tribe after conquering them, but there's no direct proof of any such event. Perhaps they came up with it themselves, and we should admire the Vikings for their brains as much as their brawn. Last up, we have a staggeringly beautiful well, a near miracle of 16th century architecture and design. This is Pozzo di San Patrizio in Orvieto, Italy. As if these photos inside it weren't dramatic enough, the whole thing is right on the edge of a cliff. The well was built during the early 1500s by the order of Pope Clement VIII. He was hiding out in the city at the time as Rome was under attack, and he knew that Orvieto would quickly run out of water in the event of a siege. His solution was this 170-foot deep well. complete with 70 windows and dual staircases specifically designed to ensure that pack animals could run up and down the well without colliding. It was a monumental task and took a full decade to complete, by which point Pope Clement was dead anyway. Despite its breathtaking beauty and the fact that it functions perfectly as a well, it was declared obsolete from the moment it was finished, and it's barely been used. The upside of that is that it's still in excellent condition. At least the people of Orvieto know they'll be able to drink if a siege ever comes along. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!